Welcome back, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than normal. There's not going to be any gadgets or widgets or anything I've fabricated or equipment we're playing on or anything like that. Today's video is going to be to explain an eye injury that I had back 13 years ago when I was 40 years old. And why am I right here? Well, ever since I was a very young kid, I've always been into construction equipment, Tonka toys and things like that. And over the years I've gained a collection of different construction equipment. So my love for that type of equipment has always been there. And as I've gotten older, the prices of toys has changed, and now I've got the real thing. And back on April 19th of 2009 is the day that I had received the eye injury, and it changed my life and my family's life, but not in a way that was horrible. It changed my life to make me look at things a little bit differently, no pun intended. But so today's video, kind of wanted to go over and do a little bit of explaining, because in the comment sections in a lot of my videos, people have asked, hey, would you mind explaining to us, you know, how you got the One Eye Customs name and maybe what happened to your eye. So I guess today I think we're going to go ahead and do that video and go through some of the different things and the reasons why I'm here today, and the channel that I'm doing, and how we got the name and where we're going with it. So sit back, relax, and hope you stick around for the story I've got for you today. I guess I want to start off by showing you what I was actually doing, or why I was doing it. So we're going to take a ride up here to the backyard and explain where it all started. Back in this area right here, up behind our house, I had a fire pit. We used to come and sit around the fire pit, and it had a stone line wall around it and all that. It just so happened that this area here needed some topsoil put in it to fill in the area where the fire pit was. And that's kind of where the whole day went a little bit south on me. So we're down here at a topsoil pile, and this is very, very similar to what I had at the time back then that I needed to get some dirt out of. And as you can see, just like back then, it had grass and everything growing into it. So what I wanted to do is take my skid loader, and it just so happens I have the very exact model toy skid loader that I had back then. It was a Case 90 XT, and you can see it was an open cab model, meaning that there was no door on the front of it. And what I did that day was I come into the pile to scoop up a load of the top grass and dirt to get that cleaned off. What my intentions was to take a bucket full, scoop it up, move it, dump that, so now I had a brand new fresh batch of good topsoil that I didn't have grass clippings or clumps in that I had to try and rake out. And at that point in time, I had put a shovel and a rake inside the cab with me. Like I said, it's an open cab. There's no door on it out front here. So the rake and shovel fit perfectly inside me, and we'll go up on my Bobcat skid loader now that I have and give you a better visual of what that was. But the instance here of what I wanted to show you of what happened, and yes, you guessed it, the shovel is what got me, but I'll explain how and I'll explain why. All right, so trying to be efficient, I decided that rather than taking the machine up there and then coming back down and getting a rake and a shovel, I would be smart and just take the rake and shovel and put it in the cab with me. So, and it wasn't an uncommon occurrence. I used to take and I would have hand tools in the cab with me all the time. Wasn't a problem, wasn't an issue for me. I just never realized what would come about from it. So one key part to this entire story is that as I walk in here into the garage to get the rake and shovel, you can see it's a little bit dark. And the first thing I did when I walked in was I put my sunglasses on my head so I could see what I was doing. And I came over here to grab a rake and a shovel. So follow me on out to the skid loader and we'll do a little bit more of explaining. But this represents the two tools that I had with me that day. And what I do, and what I've done on many occasions, is I bring them up into the cab with me. And for demonstration purposes, I removed the door off of here today. But I sit down and I have these here, and I've got the lap bar, so I have to bring the lap bar over. Now I've got the tools with me, and what I always do is I rest them here. So I've got the tools with me, so when I go into the dirt pile, take my scoop of dirt, I don't have to go and, you know, I could have put the rake and shovel in the bucket, but I would have had to get out, take these out of the bucket, get my load of dirt, go dump the dirt, come back and get the shovel and rake. So that's usually why I always put them in the cab with me. So like I said, they're here with me in the cab, two-hand controls. I run over to the dirt pile, kind of similar to what I showed you down there, and go into the dirt pile to take up a scoop to scoop off the first batch of grassy, clumpy, cruddy dirt to get down to my next load of dirt. And when I come into the dirt pile, I scoop that first load, and I raised the boom up to dump that over the back side of the pile. And I'll show you with my little model here what happened next. But when I went into that pile and raised the boom of the machine up, I didn't realize that the shovel handle had tipped forward. With that shovel handle tipped forward, when that boom was up high, I didn't realize that the cross beam down here of the machine would catch that shovel handle. And again, like I said, I'll show you with the little machine, but when I lowered the boom back down, the shovel handle got pinched on the cross beam there, behind this, and then in the footwell, the shovel got pinched in the footwell. And as it pinched and bent forward, it snapped that shovel handle, and and remember when I walked into the garage, how I took my glasses and put them up here? That probably would have saved my eye had my sunglasses been down, because when it snapped that handle, it came right straight back, and I'll show you the broken handle, came right straight back and smacked me flat across the eye. Where that shovel handle broke was at the exact height of where I'm sitting, and the broken part came straight back and hit me in the eye. You can see this cross piece right here, and that's what ties the two main arms to each other. And as I lifted this boom up, the shovel handle fell forward, and it fell in front of this arm right here. And as I lowered it down, it pinched that stick there, or the shovel handle, and snapped it in half. And when it snapped, it flew right straight back towards my face. And yes, I kept that shovel handle. I kept it as a constant reminder every day to slow down, to think about what you're doing first, and to think about the consequences, because sometimes they just really aren't worth it. And what I did, so I can explain this a little better, and I'm going to ask Autumn to walk around the side over here to give a better idea, or to show what I did. So as this shovel handle is in the machine and it tipped forward and got pinched by the bar that comes down here, it pinched that and it snapped, and it just happened to be at the perfect height that where it snapped came right straight back and hit me on the cheek and in the eyeball. And the broken portion right here is what came straight back, and I couldn't even blink. My eyelid wasn't cut, my face wasn't cut, other than just a small little, very tiny little bit of blood was on my upper portion of my cheek. but it came straight back, like I said, and hit me, and it split my eye in half. And not wanting to get too gory or gruesome about it, but I guess now that it's done and over with, it would be very similar if you were to take a grape and squeeze it. So it basically just exploded my eye. And at that point in time, I felt like, ow, that hurt. Something, just hit me pretty hard in the face. And I went and I opened my eye, and I realized I couldn't see out of that eye. And I thought, oh boy, something's really wrong. And I didn't even realize that the shovel handle was still out here in front of me and broken. So I shut the machine off, and I put my hand over my eye, and I looked back down at it like anybody would normally do. Okay, how much blood or anything like that? Well, there was no blood. And I thought, boy, something's wrong. So I went over to the house, and I walked into the door of the house, and my wife and her sister had happened to be there, standing right there when I walked in, and I had my hand covering my eye. And I said to my wife, I says, I think that I did something to my eye. I think we might need to go to the hospital. And she says, well, okay, let me look at it, just like she would normally do, a caring wife, and let me see it first. So I pulled my hand down, and I had opened my eye, and the look that I got from her, I knew something was really wrong. So at that point, it was like, okay, what is it? She goes, like, oh my gosh, we got to go to the hospital. So let's finish the story outside of the machine, and we'll explain a little bit more. All right, so now we've come back in the shop after I've explained everything that happened with the machine, the shovel handle, and how that whole thing went about. And like I said, I walked into the house and said to my wife, hey, we got to go to the hospital. And we drove to the hospital. My wife drove me to the hospital. We got into the emergency room. They took me in right away, of course, because, I wasn't just sick and didn't feel good. I had a legitimate injury. So they took me back into the emergency room, and the on-call doctor, which I happened to know and was a friend of, took a look at it, and his concern was that I needed to be in a different hospital. And it wasn't life-threatening by any means, but it was an injury that needed addressed immediately. So at that point in time, they decided to put me on the helicopter, and they life-flighted me. And again, life-flighted is a broad term. My life was not in danger. I wasn't going to die from the injury. But like I said, the injury was such that it needed addressed. So they put me on the helicopter and flew me down to a Pittsburgh hospital that has specialists. They have cornea specialists. They have retina specialists. They performed an emergency surgery where they needed to basically get the eyeball closed back up. And without going into too awful much detail, there is a vitreous fluid in your eye. It is the fluid that's in your eyeball. And they had to stitch my eyeball back up after they refilled it with the man-made vitreous fluid. And I had no clue that you could put stitches in an eyeball. Didn't know it, didn't understand it, couldn't even fathom it if somebody would have told me that prior to the injury. I do have some pictures I'll probably throw on here of the surgeries afterwards that I've had. And I think my wife and I were just talking that I think I've had 5 or 6 different surgeries on that particular eye. And that was after the initial reconstructive surgery of it. So it's still my original eyeball, but it still moves around and all that. I'm just legally blind in that eye. And they had to do the reconstructive surgery on that. And after that, after the eyeball had settled down a while, and it was months and months later, and going back and forth to the eye doctor and the different visits that I had to go through, and that was, once a week driving 2 hours to Pittsburgh for doctor's appointments, and that gets old really quick. But so I went through the reconstructive surgery, and they did 9 stitches across the eyeball, and that's literally like if you were to cut your hand or arm or whatever, they stitched the eyeball back shut, and I honestly have no idea how it held the vitreous fluid back in there, but it did. Whatever they did, however they sew it back up, kept it in there, and now my eyeball is, or at that point in time, was a little bit deformed. It's not a perfectly globe-shaped outside round form. And I was at the point of several months out where the doctor said, hey, we'd like to try and do a corneal transplant on you, and we also have to do laser on your retina. So they had to do laser surgery on the retina and do a corneal transplant. And in addition to all that, they put a scleral buckle around the eyeball. And what that is basically like a belt that they put around your eyeball. I don't know how they get in that far to do it, but they put, it's like a silicone band around your eye to keep that eyeball pushed outwards, if you will, to keep it, to have that shape, if you will, the globe shape. And so I went through that particular surgery with the retinal surgery where they had to re-laser my retina back down because the injury actually, when it exploded the eye, it actually let the retina release as well. So that had to be lasered down, and the scleral buckle also is a portion or a part of helping keep your retina attached to the back of your eye. And the cornea transplant is something that I guess I wasn't really aware of either. And one thing that I'd like to say about something like that is if you're a donor, thank you, because a recipient like myself received a donor cornea transplant. And what they do is they take a cadaver, a person that's passed, and they for lack of better terms, they cut their cornea off and they sew it back onto, in my case, my eye. That's a pretty interesting procedure in itself, because when they do that, they sew that cornea back on, and I had 24 stitches around my eyeball just outside of the iris, or the color portion of your eye. And so those stitches are what helps hold the cornea back on. But during the injury, or at the time of the injury, it also blew out the lens that's in your eye. And if you didn't know, behind your cornea is a lens. And that's what helps bring the focal points back to your retina. The cornea basically is what, gives that nice round shape to your eyeball. So after that particular corneal transplant surgery, it was maybe a year to 2 years later that I had a rejection with that cornea. It didn't work, it didn't stay, and it's common. It's very common to have rejections, just like people might have a rejection to a artificial heart or anything like that. So it was common. But back to the surgery portions of this. After the rejection, I had to have another cornea transplant, because you can't just have your eye reject that particular cornea and then just leave it go, because your eye is open then, and your eye is kind of like a balloon filled with water. You can't take and skim that top layer of the balloon off and expect it to still hold shape and everything. It doesn't work like that. So after the rejection, and why I had to have another cornea transplant was because you can't, like I said, you can't leave that cornea in, because it will become infected and very irritated, and all those particular issues that go along with that. So I had the second cornea transplant, amongst a couple other surgeries for different things. And one of them was they actually had to, when they reattach your retina, they had to inject gas into my eyeball, and I had to sleep on my stomach for, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. And what that gas bubble does is, it's just like if you were to put a piece of plastic over a bubble in a pool. What that gas bubble does is it holds tight on or pushes down on the retina, and as I'm upside down with my head down, the gas bubble is pushing backwards onto my retina, and that's what helps hold that retina on there after I had the retinal surgery. I hope I haven't made anybody pass out to this point yet, but it's kind of interesting to me because I've been through it, and I hope it's interesting to some of you that have never been through it, and I'm hoping that I can steer you away from ever having an eye injury. I don't know if I said it earlier, but back I was 40 years old when this happened. I'm 53 now, so it's been 13 years since the eye injury, and the second corneal transplant has stayed with me. It hasn't rejected. I do have to take those drops daily, and it's one of those things that the corneal transplant didn't give me any vision. I'm considered 520 in that eye, and I guess the corneal transplant was just to give the eye its shape or its globe feature. I've got a fake lens, if you will, and it's not like a contact lens. It's a lens that you are born with, and it develops within your eye. I've got a fake lens or a man-made lens inside of my eye under that corneal transplant, but it hasn't given me any vision. I wasn't really expecting to have any vision to where I would be able to see anything. And I refer what I can see, like if you look through a dark welding helmet without welding, you virtually can't see anything. You might be able to see a little bit of motion, and that's about it. But it's very dark. You can't really see light comes in. If I look up at the sun with my bad eye, I can stare straight into the sun, and it's so dark that I can't see it. I can tell that it's up there, but I can't see it. I can't make out the shape. And as far as the motion that I can see in it, I joke around and say that they're my friendly ghosts, because beyond this side of my nose and over, I can't see anything, but occasionally I see motion. And like I said, I call it my friendly ghosts because every once in a while I'll see something, and it could be a car driving past me. It could be something huge, and I wouldn't know what it was because I couldn't see it go by. But the funny thing about it is you see things and you don't really know what it was, so you turn your head. So anything, like I said, beyond this portion of my eye, I could see a whole lot more if I cut my nose off, but boy, I'd look horrible, and I just don't think that would be worth it. So as far as vision, no, I don't see anything out of that eye. What are my restrictions, and how do I make this video positive? Well, the good news is there's only 2 legal restrictions when you're blind in one eye. And one is I can't get a pilot's license. I had no intentions on ever getting a pilot's license, so that's not a problem. 2 is you cannot get a CDL license. Legally, you can't have a CDL or a pilot's license. CDL, which is a commercial driver's license, might have come in handy at some point in my life for moving some of the construction equipment, things like that. But I guess it's okay. I didn't really need that. If I need to move a piece of equipment, I can hire that done. And in the long run, I'm pretty sure it's cheaper to hire somebody to do it than to pay to have your license and the equipment and all that stuff. But as far as a positive note, I'm not one of those people that are a doom and gloom and oh, poor me, and things like that. You guys have seen my other videos. You've seen what I do, what I can do. And I would have to say that since the eye injury, my wife has been beside me every time I've got an appointment, things like that. So it's always been a very positive recovery for me. It's never been doom and gloom. And for those of you out there that might have something bad have happened to you, you will frequently ask, why me? Why me? And I've come to realize that you will never, ever get that answer. You'll never get somebody to say, okay, this is why it happened to you. It's just not there. You have to accept that stuff happens, and you can't look down on it your entire life. You can't blame other people for it. You can't take it out, and you can't be angry your entire life. You got to find a way to climb up out of those holes and make life how you want it to be. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You got to do it for yourself. So again, the injury hasn't stopped me. Like I said, there's 2 legal limitations, but those don't interest me. It's not a problem for me. I have been able to do anything and everything I've ever wanted to do. After my eye injury, we bought a camper because our kids were still very young. I hooked it to my 3/4 ton pickup truck with a 35 or 40 foot camper, pulled it around, and I said, you know what? If I back into something or if I bump a tree or a curb or whatever, it is what it is. I mean, as long as you don't injure somebody, then you kind of got to just laugh and go along with it and say, you know, if it happens, it happens. It's going to be. So I didn't limit myself to not being able to or not wanting to do these different things. I still continue to play hockey with one eye. Yes, that's a challenge. And I'll get into the biggest challenge that I've had with only having one eye. I helped coach lacrosse. I used to ride dirt bikes. I did that for a while. There's a lot of things that I did. I was big into sports and did all that stuff. And I guess one of the biggest things as to why I don't do a lot of those things anymore is because I'm just getting too old. And I don't bounce back up as easy as I used to. But it really doesn't have anything to do with the eyeball. I can still hunt. Fortunately, it was my right eye. Or excuse me, it was my left eye, and I'm right eye dominant. So I can still archery hunt. I can still do all those things. I can shoot my guns. So there's never been a limitation there. But I remember one thing very loud and clear that the doctor said to me. And in one of my appointments, he looked me straight in the face and he said, whatever you do, don't ruin your other one or don't injure your other eye, your good eye. And boy, did that really strike home with me, because then I got to thinking, you know, when you're completely blind, your whole entire world changes. There are so many things now you can no longer do. You would have to have a seeing eye dog. You know, just the things you couldn't drive. There's just so many things in life that you would miss out on if you were completely blind. So that statement that day really, really struck me as, wow, that is a serious concern. And to this day, I wear, whether it be sunglasses or safety glasses, and I've got them throughout the garage and I keep them everywhere. And my wife always says, she says, you wear your safety glasses everywhere. And I do, legitimately I do. And it all goes back to that comment that the doctor made to me was, whatever you do, don't mess up your good one. So, that really, in a nutshell, kind of sums up my life with having one eye being injured and one good eye. So when I'm out here fabricating or I'm doing these different videos, things like that, that's always in the back of my mind is, whatever you do, don't mess up your good eye. And over the years, I go in and I have eye appointments, and we're down to about every 6 months now for, they got to do a pressure check on that eye and make sure that it isn't gaining pressure. Fortunately for me, my optic nerve was not damaged in the accident. And an optic nerve is very similar to a spinal cord. There is no medical miracles out there right now that can perform a severed spinal cord or an optic nerve. Those are two of the main things that I know of in the human body that cannot be repaired. You've heard of people having heart transplants and liver transplants and kidney and just all those different things. So there's just about every portion of your body can be fixed or transplanted or made better. But if you sever an optic nerve or your spinal cord, then as of modern medicine right now, they can't fix that. So fortunately, my optic nerve was not damaged. It is still my eyeball with a cadaver cornea on there. That leads me into the YouTube channel and the YouTube channel name, One Eye Customs. How did I come up with that? Well, I actually really didn't come up with that. I knew that I liked fabricating. I knew that I liked making things and creating. And my wife and I were talking one day, and I says, you know, at some point I might want to do this as a business, but I need to have a business name. So we were having these different discussions, and I was throwing out different names, and she says, well, what about One Eye Customs? And I went, that's it. That's what we're going to call it. It'll be One Eye Customs. Back to the positive side of this. Yeah, I injured my eye. It happened. I've worked through it with help from my friends and my family, most importantly. And I guess I wanted to pass this on because I've had enough people comment and ask, hey, could you give us the story of your eye if you feel like it? So I guess we're going to end that video here today. If you like the video, if you're still here, if you stuck around long enough, give me a thumbs up, and you know, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and we'll have more videos. I guarantee they won't be like this one. They'll be with the equipment, the machinery, and all that. So thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you on the next one.